My daughter looked me straight in the eye on Thanksgiving morning, the turkey still in the oven, and said, "Dad, we need you to find your own place by the end of the month." She said it the way you'd cancel a subscription. Calm, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing in the mirror. She thought she was cutting loose a tired old man who'd lost his pharmacy job 3 months earlier. She thought I was broke, confused and out of options. What my daughter did not know was that the man standing in her kitchen in a worn flannel shirt and scuffed shoes had spent the last 40 years quietly building something she never knew existed. And the moment that door closed behind me, the last test was over. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you where it started. I moved in with my daughter and her husband 8 months before that Thanksgiving. It wasn't something I planned. After Dorothy passed, my wife of 31 years, the woman who kept me human, the house in Dayton felt like a museum. Every room preserved exactly the way she left it. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand. Her handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the fridge. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. My daughter called and said, "Dad, come stay with us, just for a while. We have the guest room." It sounded like love. I should have known better. Not because she's a bad person, but because her husband is the kind of man who calculates everything. He's an accountant. He thinks in columns, assets and liabilities. And somewhere in the first few weeks, I watched him recategorize me. I had taken a part-time position at a pharmacy near their house in Columbus. Nothing grand. 40 hours a week, $12 an hour. Enough to contribute to groceries and utilities without making it awkward. I didn't need the money, but they didn't know that. I needed the routine. I needed somewhere to go in the mornings, so I didn't sit in that guest room staring at the ceiling, missing Dorothy. The arrangement worked on the surface. I ate dinner with them on most nights. I helped with their daughter, my granddaughter, who was 7 and had her grandmother's eyes and her great-grandmother's stubbornness. On Saturday mornings, I took her to the park and we fed the ducks, and she told me everything a 7-year-old considers urgent and important, which is quite a lot. Those Saturday mornings were the only part of that arrangement that felt real. Everything else had a transactional undertone. My son-in-law started keeping a notepad in the kitchen. Grocery costs, utility increases, the water bill in October. He showed it to me once, casually, the way you'd show someone a receipt they accidentally left on the counter. "Just so we're all on the same page," he said. I nodded. I paid my share without comment. Then in August, I got laid off. The pharmacy chain was consolidating locations. They let 4 of us go on a Friday afternoon. I drove home, told my daughter at dinner. She set down her fork. Her husband picked his back up. That was the moment. I didn't see it clearly then, but looking back, that was the moment they both made their decision. They just needed a few months to choreograph the exit. By October, the guest room had become the subject of ongoing renovation planning. By early November, my son-in-law had started leaving real estate printouts on the kitchen counter. Senior living communities, studio apartments near the bus line. He never said anything directly. He let the paper do the work. Then came Thanksgiving morning. I was up early, the way I always am. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table reading the news on my phone. My granddaughter came downstairs in her pajamas and climbed into my lap without asking, which is the best way to be greeted by anyone. We sat there for a while in the quiet, and I thought, this is enough. Whatever happens, this is enough. My daughter came down around 8. She poured herself a cup of coffee, stood at the counter, and said she needed to talk to me. Her husband came in right behind her, which told me the conversation had been scripted. You don't arrive at the same moment by accident. She told me they loved me. She told me this wasn't easy. She told me the guest room situation wasn't sustainable. She used the word sustainable twice. Then she said they needed me out by the end of the month. I asked if they'd like me to leave before or after dessert. She didn't laugh. Her husband cleared his throat. I told them I understood. I said I'd figure something out. I let my voice go soft and a little lost, which wasn't entirely an act. There was a part of me that genuinely grieved in that kitchen. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because this was Dorothy's daughter. This was the little girl we raised. and she was reading from a script her husband wrote. My granddaughter was standing at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know how long she'd been there. She looked at her mother and said, "Is Grandpa leaving?" "We'll talk about it later," my daughter said. "But it's Thanksgiving," my granddaughter said. Her voice didn't waver. 7 years old, and she held her ground better than either of her parents. My son-in-law told her to go back upstairs and finish getting dressed. She looked at me. I gave her a small nod. She went, but she looked back once from the landing, and that look is the one I'll carry the longest. I ate Thanksgiving dinner at that table. I complimented the food. I helped clear the plates. Then I went to the guest room, called my attorney, and told him the experiment was finished. His name is Cyrus Webb. I've had Cyrus on retainer for 22 years. He's methodical and unsentimental, which is exactly what you need in an attorney and exactly what you don't want in a friend. He answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" he asked. "About how I expected," I said. "Do you want to start tonight or wait until Monday?" I looked around the guest room. The cardboard boxes I'd never fully unpacked. The framed photo of Dorothy on the dresser, the only personal item I'd bothered to put out. "Tonight," I said, "start with the pharmacy job. I want the reinstatement letter ready. And Cyrus, pull the property records on this house." He already knew what he'd find. 3 years ago, when my daughter and her husband were underwater on their mortgage and too proud to ask for help directly, I reached out to Cyrus and structured a quiet arrangement through a holding company, recovered 8 months of their mortgage payments through an LLC they believe was a lender assistance program tied to a federal relief fund. They applied online, were approved, and never once questioned why the money showed up so cleanly. People believe what they need to believe. I lay down on the guest room bed without taking off my shoes. I stared at the ceiling. Dorothy would have hated this, the whole elaborate architecture of it. She was a direct woman. When something bothered her, she said so. She would have sat my daughter down over coffee and talked until they understood each other. She had that gift. But Dorothy was gone, and I had tried the direct way, twice, in those first weeks when I felt the temperature of the house changing. I tried to talk to my daughter alone. Both times she said everything was fine. Everything was fine until it wasn't, and by then the conversation was already scripted and her husband was standing in the doorway at 8 in the morning with his arms crossed. I didn't sleep much. Around midnight, my phone showed a notification from an account I rarely check, a secondary card I'd left in the drawer of the nightstand when I moved out of Dorothy's house. I transferred it to the guest room when I arrived, and at some point stopped thinking about it. When I left that afternoon, after dinner and dishes and goodbyes that were too polite, I noticed the drawer was open. The notification was from a home goods store. $412. Throw pillows, apparently. And a rug. I sat up in the bed at the hotel I'd checked into, a Marriott 20 minutes from their house, and looked at the screen for a long time. Then I called Cyrus back. "The card I left in the guest room drawer," I said. "They found it." He was quiet a moment. "Do you want me to freeze it?" I set the phone on the pillow and looked at the ceiling. I thought about my granddaughter on the stairs. I thought about the look she gave me. I thought about my daughter standing in that kitchen saying, "Sustainable." "No," I said. "Let it run. But I want every transaction documented. Date, amount, merchant. Build the file." Over the next 10 days, I watched the total climb from $400 to just over $11,000. A couch. A new television. Apparently a gym membership. My son-in-law bought tools. My daughter bought clothes. My daughter bought clothes. They moved fast. The way people do when they think no one is watching. On day 11, I froze the card. I did it at 11 in the morning, while I imagined my son-in-law was at work and my daughter was mid-checkout somewhere. I pictured the screen going red. I pictured her trying it again. Then I called the holding company's property manager and told him to send the formal notice. 3 days later, Cyrus called me. "They've been trying to reach you." I know. Your son-in-law called the office. He wants to discuss a payment arrangement. Tell him we'll meet, I said, somewhere neutral, not the house. We met at a diner near downtown Columbus on a Wednesday afternoon. My son-in-law arrived first and took a booth near the back. He was wearing his work clothes, which I'd rarely seen. He looked different in them. Smaller somehow, like the clothes were carrying responsibility he wasn't entirely comfortable with. He brought a folder. Of course he had. I arrived looking exactly like what he thought I was. A retired man in an old coat. I shuffled a little. I let my hand tremble slightly, lifting the coffee cup. I had gotten very good at this. He said he was glad I came. He said things had gotten complicated. He said there seemed to be an issue with their mortgage servicer, some kind of administrative error, and that they received a notice that was, frankly, alarming. I nodded. I looked confused. I said that sounded very stressful. He said there was also the matter of the credit card. I furrowed my brow. The card in the drawer? Yes, he said carefully. We found it when we were clearing out the room. We weren't sure if you wanted it back or you used it, I said. Very gently, very confused. He shifted. He explained that they'd made some purchases they'd intended to discuss with me, that it was a misunderstanding, that they fully intended to reimburse me once the mortgage situation was sorted out. He opened his folder. Inside was a document. He slid it across the table with 2 fingers, like a card player revealing a hand. It was a power of attorney form. He had filled in my name at the top. He explained very calmly that it would allow him to act on my behalf in resolving the mortgage matter. It would simplify things considerably, given my situation, given my age, given the complexity of the financial picture. It was really the most efficient path forward. He said efficient 3 times. I picked up the document. I squinted at it. I patted my coat pockets as though looking for glasses. This is a lot of legal language, I said. I don't read so well without my glasses. He smiled. He said not to worry about the details. He said it was standard. He said if I just signed at the bottom, he could take it from there. I looked at the pen he was holding out. Then I set the document back on the table. I need to use the restroom, I said. Excuse me a moment. I walked to the back of the diner. The owner, a man named Vincent who'd been briefed by Cyrus 2 days earlier, was waiting near the hallway. He handed me a thin envelope. Inside was a single document, different from the one in the folder. Not a power of attorney, a promissory note drafted by Cyrus acknowledging $11,240 in unauthorized card use, plus a separate line for the mortgage assistance that had been provided through the holding company, legally binding, witnessed. I went back to the table. I sat down. I put the envelope in my coat pocket. I picked up his pen, and I signed his document. Or rather, I appeared to. What I actually signed was the promissory note, which I'd slid out of the envelope and beneath his document while he was checking his phone. The table was dim. He was distracted. People see what they expect to see. I slid the documents back across the table. He checked for my signature, saw it at the bottom, and let out a breath he'd been holding since I walked in. Thank you, he said. This is the right call. Is it? I said. He looked up. I smiled at him. A real smile this time, not the confused old man version. Give my granddaughter a hug for me. He was still working out what had changed in my face when I stood up and put on my coat. I called Cyrus from the parking lot. He signed the note. Witnessed. Vincent. And I recorded the conversation on my phone. Cyrus was quiet for a moment. You know we have to move on the property now. I know. And the card charges. If you want to pursue them formally, I want a letter sent to their house by Friday, I said. Not a threat, just a statement of account, itemized, every transaction, with the promissory note attached. And the house? I stood in the parking lot of that diner looking at the bare November trees and thought about my daughter at 8 years old, standing at the kitchen counter in Dayton trying to help Dorothy make pie crust, getting flour on her shirt and not caring at all. 30 days, I said. Give them 30 days. And Cyrus, before you file anything, I need you to do one more thing. 2 weeks later, I walked into the lobby of the Nationwide Children's Hospital Foundation annual gala in a tuxedo that cost more than my son-in-law's monthly salary. I'd been on the foundation board for 11 years under a family trust name. Very few people in Columbus knew William Calder, the retired pharmacist who lived with his daughter, was the same man as W.E. Calder, the named donor on the pediatric wing on the 3rd floor. My daughter and her husband had bought tickets. That was what Cyrus's one more thing was. He'd arranged for them to receive a pair of complimentary tickets to the gala through a community outreach program, sent with a letter saying they'd been selected as honored guests in recognition of family contributions to the foundation, which was technically true. They were my family. I watched them arrive from the mezzanine. My daughter was wearing a green dress I hadn't seen before. My son-in-law was tugging at his collar. They stood near the entrance looking at the room the way people do when they're not sure if they belong somewhere, but are determined not to show it. I watched my son-in-law approach 2 men near the bar. He was networking. He had his card out within 4 minutes. I timed it. At 8:15, the foundation president took the podium. She thanked the board. She thanked the major donors. Then she said there was someone she wanted to recognize. Someone who had supported the pediatric wing for over a decade and had chosen, until now, to remain anonymous. I came down the stairs. I don't have a dramatic memory of the moment my daughter saw me. What I have is the sound. A single short sound she made, something between a word and an exhale, that carried across the room in the half-second before the applause started. Her husband said nothing. He just went still, the way a person does when the ground moves under them and they're not sure which way to step. I took the podium. I thanked the foundation. I made the remarks I prepared about Dorothy, about why we'd supported this hospital, about the children on the 3rd floor who had nothing to do with any of the mess I was about to finish. Then I said I had a personal matter to address. I said it quietly, without theater. I said that in the past several months I had been testing a hypothesis that the people closest to us reveal themselves most clearly when they believe we have nothing left to offer. That I had conducted this test and I had my results. I looked at my daughter. I said that as of that morning, the property at their address had been transferred from my holding company to a housing nonprofit that provides transitional homes for families in crisis, that the transfer was complete and recorded, that they would receive formal notice and 30 days to vacate. My daughter put her hand over her mouth. I said that the trust established in my wife Dorothy's name would, effective immediately, designate my granddaughter as sole beneficiary, that the funds were held in an irrevocable trust managed by Cyrus Webb and would cover her education, her health, and whatever she needed to build a life on her own terms. That her parents could not access those funds, not $1. My son-in-law took a step forward. A security guard near the stage took a step toward him. He stopped. I said one more thing. I said that somewhere in this city tonight, a 7-year-old girl was with a babysitter, probably watching a movie, probably eating too much popcorn, completely unaware that her grandfather had just made sure she would never have to choose between her family's chaos and her own future. I stepped back from the podium. The room was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then it wasn't. I didn't stay for the reception. I took the service exit, walked through the kitchen where the catering staff were stacking plates, said thank you to a woman who held the door, and stepped out into the cold Columbus night. My driver was waiting. I got into the back seat and sat in the silence for a while. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my daughter. A text from my son-in-law that was 2 sentences long and not worth repeating. And 1 text from an unknown number that said only, "Grandpa, it's me. Mom let me use her phone. I heard you on the news. I love you." I don't mind telling you that I sat in the back of that car and cried, not from sadness exactly, from something that doesn't have a clean name, relief and grief and love all pressing on the same place at once. I texted back, "I love you too, sweetheart. See you Saturday." 3 days later, I picked her up for the park. My daughter stood at the door and didn't speak. That was fine. I wasn't there to argue. I was there for the 7-year-old in the yellow coat who ran down the front steps and grabbed my hand like she was afraid I'd float away. We fed the ducks. She told me everything important. The ducks were rude. One of them had a broken feather that stuck up funny. Her best friend at school had a dog that could open the refrigerator. She was considering becoming a veterinarian, or possibly a submarine pilot. She hadn't decided. I listened to all of it. On the drive home, she fell asleep in the back seat, her cheek against the window, her breath fogging the glass in small, slow circles. I drove carefully. I turned the radio down. This is what I want you to understand, and I mean this for anyone who's been where I've been. The point was never the money. The money was only ever the language they spoke. The point was the little girl asleep in the back seat. The point was making sure that no matter what her parents did or didn't do, she would have something solid under her feet. Dorothy used to say that you can't build love on debt. She meant it emotionally, but I've come to think she meant it every way. When everything you give comes with an invisible invoice, and when the people you're giving to have forgotten how to say thank you, then what looks like love is just a loan with no repayment plan. I learned to stop extending credit to people who'd written me off as a bad investment. If you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, not from a stranger, but from family, which is so much harder, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is show people exactly what they built, right before you walk away from it.